When the light first entered Xinyun's chamber, he didn't realize that the sun had already risen, so he stood up and stretched his body. Even though he stayed up the whole night, he feels like he has had a good night's sleep. On the other hand, Sam was running in his direction while calling at him to see if he was awake. When Sam informed Xinyun that he needed to go down because someone had come to visit him, Xinyun was taken aback by the information. It didn't dawn on him that he had a visitor until the visitor made it very obvious that it was he whom the visitor was looking for. When he heard another piece of information, it threw him for a loop when Sam told him that his guest was his fiancée. Meanwhile, there have been rumblings that a carriage has made its way to the White Cloud faction. The first guard approached the second guard and asked him whether or not the cart in front of them belonged to the GM family. The second guard replied that he had never heard that the GM family was coming and that he had never seen the GM family before. In addition to that, the person who was driving the carriage reported to his master that they had already arrived at the White Cloud faction. As soon as the lady disembarked from the carriage, all of the personnel promptly fell in line in order to greet her. It was White Blossom GM Manhwa. However, people take note of her arrival and immediately begin inquiring among themselves about who the lady was. People are staring at her and gushing about how beautiful she is as she walks. People begin to congregate in a spot where they can see Manhwa, and some of them remark that she has the appearance of an angel. Others say that she is beautiful. A person who is in front of a crowd of people gathering yelling for them not to push is ignored by those individuals, which leads to his falling to the ground and his face making contact with the mud. When he lifted his head, he was gasping for air, but as soon as he opened his eyes, he was shocked and horrified when he discovered that one of Manhwa's subordinates, who has a huge body, was furious at him because the hem of Manhwa's clothes was full with mud that flowed from his face. The person apologized in a hasty manner despite the fact that he had not done it on purpose. Manhwa's subordinate attempted to approach the individual, but Manhwa stopped him and instead abruptly stepped up to the individual, inquired if he was okay, and even handed the individual some medication to treat his injuries. On the other hand, people were taken aback by her generosity due to the fact that the rare flower that belongs to the GM family also possesses a lovely personality. Others have made the observation that beautiful thoughts are associated with beautiful individuals. Manhwa is shown to be annoyed and has furrowed her brows after hearing everything that was said. Meanwhile, within the White Cloud faction Blue Cloud building, Jin Sang was focusing his attention on one particular chair. He had nothing to do and was thinking that if it weren't for Xinyun, that chair would have been his all along. He wonders to himself why the man in front of him head held so high, and he wonders if the man is aware that his father is still alive. He was referring to Du Jinu, leader of the White Cloud faction, and White Beauty Blade was the second gentleman seated in front of Jin Sang. He was taken aback when someone called him, and it turned out to be No Diun, the Clear Cloud leader for the White Cloud faction. He explained to Jinu that the reason for their late arrival was because his son was a little slow to get up. When his father blamed him for being late, his son, who is positioned in his back, became furious because it was actually his father's fault because he got home late. However, this causes his father to get irate, and he gives him the order to present himself at Jinu. His son was the vice leader of the Clear Cloud, No Gunho. He did it in a rather abrupt manner and bowed to greet Jinu. Afterwards, while Jinu and Nodi were having a conversation, Jin Sang was irritated when he saw that Nodi first greeted Jinu, not him, and didn't notice him. He told himself that Nodi was the person who isn't swayed by a woman, money, or even martial arts, because Clear Clouds only follow those stronger than them. Jin Sang furrowed his brow while looking at the two men. They had no choice but to come under him when he killed Xinyun and became the lord of the place. However, a man took note of the fact that Jin Sang was already present, and remarked that he seemed to be someone who was destined to become the person who would raise the White Cloud faction to its highest point. The man's name was Moti Gil, and he served as the small cloud leader for the White Cloud faction. Additionally, it would appear that every member of the faction is present, which is why the man standing next to Jin Sang stated that they need to get the meeting started before their visitors come. Jinu, however, was against it due to the fact that their first master had not yet come. On the other side, Gil suddenly laughed and told Jinu that it was okay to start since the first master was either not feeling well or as if he would come to join the meeting. However, to everyone's amazement, the men inside the room widened their eyes when they saw Xinyun go through the door, indicating that they thought he was going to attend the meeting. So he came, uttered Jin Sang, who was clenching his teeth and furrowed his brow out of annoyance that he felt for Xinyun. Sam was taken by surprise when Xinyun grabbed him by the wrist and pulled him inside the room where all of the faction leaders were gathered. Since Sam was merely a servant, he had no idea what to do or how he should react to the situation. He was sitting in the chair. He was going to ask his master a question, but his master cut him off and told him to remain seated instead. On the other hand, Gil was incensed and demanded that Xinyun allow a servant to take a seat in the assembly room of the Blue Cloud side, stating that he had never seen anything like it in all of history. Sam, who was shaking with fright, looked to his master for assistance in an instant, but his master disregarded him. Xinyun, on the other hand, asks Gil to stop and wonders aloud what the problem could possibly be if a servant sat with them. "I told you, why are you allowing dirty servants sits with us?" exclaimed Gil. Xinyun's irritation increased, and he yelled at Gil, telling him to pay close attention as he explained that Sam was his underling before he became a servant. Sam, who was sitting next to him and listening to what was going on, was perplexed and didn't know what to do. Afterwards, Xinyun unleashed a power and intently glanced at Gil at the very moment that Gil was ready to say something. As a consequence, Gil broke out in a cold sweat and was horrified when he saw Woon's face. In addition to this, Gil wonders what sort of appearance Woon has or whether or not this Woon is the same Woon that he used to know. After that, everyone's attention is drawn to Woon's direction, and they appear perplexed when he asks Gil if he needs any permission from him so that Sam can sit with him. Will not fix his gaze attentively on Gil in a manner that suggests a desire to frighten the latter. Gil instantly bent his head and murmured in a shaky voice that there would be no problem if Woon requested that Sam would sit beside him. He continued by saying that if Woon wished that Sam would sit beside him, there would be no difficulty. Jin Sang interfered and said it was fine because it would be just that moment Sam was going to sit beside Woon since his older brother is still a bit ill. That's why he needs a servant on his side. Gil abruptly said that Jin Sang was right and praised the latter for his astounding kindness. However, Quack suddenly says that it seems that things have been settled. They have to start the meeting. Quack looks at Woon and seems to be observing him, but the latter notices it. In addition, as they all know, GM family has visited the palace unexpectedly, and they are expecting two objectives. First, they wish to end the scheduled commissions. "What reason do they have to end the commissions that have lasted for 10 years? Exclaimed Nodi. That's why Quack explained to them that the GM family has been complaining about their workers and their attitudes. But he doesn't think that the White Cloud faction was making mistakes and believes that there is an ulterior motive. Nodi abruptly asks what kind, but Jinwoo remains silent and thinks about the situation. On the other hand, Gil reveals to them that, in accordance with the information provided by their source, the head of the GM family regularly confers with members of the Hwang Rock clan. However, Kang suddenly let out a sigh of irritation as a result of the annoyance he felt because of Quack and Gil could just tell the facts, and they are discussing the White Cloud faction, whose true objective was to bring down Jinwoo. In addition to this, Nodi was so enraged that he sprang up unexpectedly and slammed the table, and he screams that he doesn't understand why, out of all the commissioners, they go to Hwang Rock. Afterward, they all turn their attention to the door when someone from the outside announces that GM Maiho from the GM family is entering. When the door opened, Maiho abruptly bowed to greet the men within. Xinyun and Jinwoo was just looking at Maiho and seemed annoyed. Jinwoo assumed that the custom is to leave the guards outside, and she plainly showed that Maiho didn't trust them. "Nothing much changed us, although you have become more beautiful," uttered Jin Sang. Maiho suddenly blushed when she heard the words of Jin Sang. However, Nodi made the observation that it appears Maiho and her subordinates are rather impatient because they sent them a tea to the waiting room before they came before the tea had a chance to cool down. The big man was one of Maiho's subordinates, and he immediately laughed and scratched his head. He apologized, stating that the waiting room was too small for him to wait in. He also asked for permission to get right to the point regarding the reason for their unexpected visit in order to save time because it appeared as though they were all very busy people. As soon as Jinwoo gave him permission to speak, the big man quickly apologized and informed Jinwoo that from this point on, the GM family will cut any ties with the White Cloud faction. "Cut ties with us? You can't just notify us like this one-sidedly," exclaimed Nodi. The big man explained that the head of the family had told him that an organization without an owner is destined to fail, so he couldn't understand how they could have let such a place handle their commission. Jin Sang let out a quick sigh, and it appeared as though he was getting frustrated. He then asked the family head if his ideas were definitive. As a response, the big man explained that if the problem that he described will be fixed, perhaps the family of GM would change his mind because they do have that bond from all of those years of cooperating, so they will allow the faction's leader a half a month or leeway to decide. However, Jinwoo furrowed his brow and thought deeply. He told himself that it was the abrupt visit, and the pressure on us and a rude request to choose a leader of their clan in just half a month. He was looking intently at Jin Sang. He assumed that a deal with the latter and the head of the GM family was made for sure. Moreover, according to the big man, the engagement between Xinyun and manhwa. However, because Xinyun cut him off, that's why he is unable to continue his sentence. But before Xinyun could tell what was in his mind, he heard Jin Sang's thoughts calling him an idiot. And according to the former, he can't forget his first love, which refers to manhwa even after nearly dying. On the other hand, manhwa was perplexed, and she looked at Xinyun as though she wanted to know what was on his mind with regard to their engagement. When Xinyun made the announcement that he wished his engagement with manhwa to be called off, every one of the leaders of the various factions, including Sam and manhwa, were taken aback and perplexed by his statement. Kang had already seen manhwa before the GM family arrived in the Blue Cloud Hall, and the moment he did, his head began to hurt in the same way as it had when he had met Jin Sang. However, he was able to tolerate the pain by drawing in and circulating the weaker yin mana. At the same time, he heard someone's voice echoing in his brain. Then, all of a sudden, he saw the memory of Xinyun from the time that manhwa introduced herself to him for the first time. Manhwa expresses her joy at seeing Xinyun, and the two of them discuss how much they love each other and their engagement. But that was only manhwa's outward demeanor because she was concealing a negative attitude on the inside. She was criticizing Xinyun by saying that she would not marry Xinyun, who in her opinion resembles a pig, if he were not an heir to the Beacon clan. When they were outside, manhwa also instructed Xinyun to act as if she did not recognize her so that manhwa would not kill Xinyun on the spot if he revealed that she knew her. Xinyun also witnessed Jin Sang and manhwa engaging in sexual activity. Manhwa was a repulsive lady who covered her actual personality behind a facade. But Kang was thrown for a loop when he was confronted with yet another memory of Xinyun. A vile woman could be heard ranting about how those despicable peasants took their own lives because they were unhappy, and how those peasants should have thanked the woman for passing away instead. It appears that she was arrested for something because she was led out by two security officers. Regarding the recollection that kept popping up in Kang's head, he was bewildered. He convinced himself that it was not a recollection and reasoned that it must have been a memory of the future from a period of time that had already transpired. However, he had no idea how the recollection of the future that he hadn't yet experienced got into his head. He hadn't lived through it yet. Was it Xinyun's fate to regain consciousness? He starts to wonder what it was that Xinyun was keeping to himself. If he gains a few more levels, he will be able to learn the talents that can uncover deeper memories. And by the time he does, he will undoubtedly be completely knowledgeable about everything. Meanwhile, when Xinyun declared that he wished to call off his engagement to manhwa, everyone's jaws dropped and they were taken aback. Manhwa bent her head because she was embarrassed by the fact that Xinyun does not want to interact with her despite the fact that everyone adores her. Xinyun inquired of manhwa once again because the latter was avoiding her questions. "Do you have some lingering attachments towards me?" he added. Because Xinyun had the audacity to offend their young lady, the big man became outraged at Xinyun. Nodi also became enraged and issued a command to the big man, telling him to mind what he said while he was conversing with their young master. Despite the fact that the entire room was in disarray, Xinyun maintained his composure and scratched his head. He stated that it appeared as though they were intending to ask about the engagement to him as well, so he questioned what appears to be the issue if he first breaks off the engagement. "How dare you think of those words that you can say?" Yells of the big man. His vein can be seen on his head due to the annoyance that he felt because they were in trouble. If word got around that their lady got rejected by that pig, then the family leader would have his head. On the other hand, Jin Sang and manhwa were surprised and irritated when Xinyun calmly stated that the people concerned would know more about the disengagement. Afterwards, after what the big man heard, he claimed that he cannot overlook Xinyun for insulting their young lady and released a force against Xinyun. But to his amazement, Sam was struggling under the force that he had released, while Xinyun appeared unaffected and maintained his composure throughout. He was perplexed because Xinyun, who is completely ignorant of martial arts, is reverting back to the energy he possessed when he was at the pinnacle of his career as a martial artist, while at the same time maintaining his composure and not collapsing flat on his back or wetting his pants. The big man couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he unleashed all of his might in the belief that Xinyun was most likely fighting through the pain with everything he had. On the other hand, Jinwoo takes note of the energy that the big man discharges, and he was Steel Axe Black Bear. So, he asked the Black Bear if he should take it as a declaration of war from the GM family. And if that's the case, he informed Black Bear that he was ready to fight right then and there. The whiteness that appears in his eyes is accompanied with the discharge of power. However, Black Bear quickly cursed because, despite Jinwoo's advanced age, his skill hasn't diminished. And it's still far too risky to ridicule the entirety of the Beacon clan. Therefore, the Black Bear decided to stop releasing energy and stated that they will not be expressing their complaints to the rest of the Beacon clan. They only wish to exact revenge on Xinyun for the insult directed at manhwa. However, Jinwoo was irritated and thought that it was foolish due to the fact that any complaints against their young master were complaints against the Beacon clan as a whole. Afterwards, Jin Sang interjected himself and explained that it was a complicated matter, and that they can't take responsibility for the choices that his older brother had taken without first addressing it with the leaders of the factions. However, it was difficult to prevent the GM family from defending manhwa's dignity and reputation. He wants them to give some thought to the nature of the relationship that exists between the Beacon family and the Jun family over the long term, and he advises that they settle the dispute by having a duel between the two families. Jin Sang believed that even if there is a regrettable accident, it is the perfect plan to explain that it was a mistake. On the other hand, when Nodi and Jinwoo heard about the duel, their eyes opened and they made a frowning expression with their brows. On the other hand, the Black Bear gave some thought to backing out of the duel before ultimately deciding to continue with it. But Sam immediately stepped up and reminded them that duels make no sense for someone like his master who has no training in martial arts. He explained his reasoning by saying that they are a waste of time. Even Jinwoo and Nodi were against the duel and declared that it was impossible for Xinyun to win because he knows nothing about martial arts. Jin Sang, on the other hand, was quite confident in his chances of victory. The young master is teased by the Black Bear, who forms a grin on his face and suggests that the young master is going to be a coward if he steps back from the responsibilities. He also mentioned that if Xinyun was a little nervous, he should try begging on his knees in front of their young lady, and because their young lady has a kind heart, she would forgive him. He stated that even if Xinyun was a little worried, he should do it. But Jin Sang couldn't help but laugh since he knew it was the end for Xinyun. However, both Sam and Jinwoo were taken aback when Xinyun abruptly rose up, turned around, and left the building despite the fact that Sam and Nodi were attempting to prevent him from doing so. Xinyun abruptly halted when he was in front of the GM family, but he disregarded them and continued to walk outside. As a consequence, the GM family was surprised when they observed that Xinyun did not pay attention towards them. Everyone follows Xinyun outdoors and watches as he performs some stretching exercises. Xinyun, however, was irritated by the fact that they continued to chatter on and on without stopping. They were perplexed since they were aware that Xinyun did not have any prior experience with martial arts. Hence, they were at a loss for words when Xinyun abruptly turned around and announced that he will fight against the Black Bear. A man was calmly sharpening his blade when he noticed other people make their way towards something. He yelled out to someone who was walking by, "Why is everyone in such a hurry?" Someone has apparently informed the man that there is a duel going on, and it appears like their master and the GM family are going at it. When the man heard that their master was heading into conflict, he couldn't believe what he was hearing because everyone knows that their master has unlocked a wealth of knowledge in martial arts. However, a large number of individuals were congregating at the gym that belonged to the Beacon clan. Nodi and his son were worried about their master and urged Jinwoo to stop the battle because their master may get gravely harmed, and there is no way that the GM family had assigned to manhwa are ordinary men. But why did Mr. Il-gong-ya? If it's not a heartbreak, he can't be. Utter Nodi. However, Jinwoo revealed to them that he wished to put an end to the duel but that there was nothing that could be done about it at this point. He also warned them that if he interfered with the combat, all of the members' hearts would turn away from the first master. Nodi furrowed his brow and persuaded himself that the Vice Lord's remarks were correct. He reasoned that a person who betrays the faith of his followers cannot ascend to the position of the monarch, and that fleeing the duel would be the same as abdicating his position as lord. On the other side, Jinwoo was irate since it was not a circumstance in which they could simply wait and watch what happened, and this made her upset. If their first master is in danger, he will seek assistance, so Nodi does not need to be concerned in any way. But Nodi was perplexed since no one is permitted to interfere until it is determined for certain how the winter would play out. They will turn to their Vice Lord for assistance in the event that anything untoward occurs with their first master, despite the fact that this will bring his reputation into disrepute. In addition, Kang seemed bored, yet he was paying attention to every word that Nodi and Jinwoo said. On his side was his servant, who begged him to back out of the duel because there is no logical reason for a duel to take place. On the other hand, the big man turned his attention to Kang and inquired as to whether or not he was prepared to begin. Manhwa acts as if she is about to pass out and makes a scared face when Kang suddenly walks through the stage. This causes Manhwa to give the impression that she is losing consciousness. Her servant was attempting to calm her, assuring her that the situation was not her fault and that her outward appearance did not compare to the beauty of her inner self. When Manhwa was told by Kang that her acting ability was amazing and that she would be a perfect fit for an opera, she immediately covered her face and furrowed her forehead in anger. As a direct consequence of this, all of Manhwa's staff became enraged with him, including the big man who was yelling at him and demanding to know how much longer he would continue talking about their young lady. On the other hand, Jinmu explained to the Black Bear that the use of inner Kai in the duel is not permitted because Confucius was not a Murim and the rules of the duel prevent it. The Black Bear was angry with Jinmu because he believed that they did not know the rule, which is why he told them that there was no need to worry about it. After then, the Black Bear directs his attention to his subordinates and inquires among them as to who is interested in receiving instruction from the first master. His subordinates all of a sudden raised their hands and began clamoring for him to call their names because they believed that if Manhwa took notice of them, it would be the best thing for their careers. But because there were a lot of people willing to help, Black Bear had a difficult time choosing. After some time, he chose Odal Singh to face off against Xinyun in a duel. Singh is cautioned by the Black Bear not to use his inner Kai and to focus only on the threat. Singh, who had a grin on his face and appeared pleased to overcome Xinyun, muttered, "Do I have any choice?" Utter Singh, who had a grin on his face and seemed excited to defeat Xinyun. However, Black Bear was perplexed when Kang asked him what he was doing because Kang intended for the duel to be fought between Black Bear and Kang himself and not with some subordinate. Sam, Jinnu, Jin Sang, and No Di, together with his son, were all unable to find the words to express themselves. And as a consequence of this, the Black Bear grew furious, as evidenced by the widening of his eyes and the clenching of his jaws. He claimed that Kang would have to deal with his subordinates first if he chose to fight an opponent with an excessively large power gap between them. This would result in condemnation from the rest of the world. Kang was too obstinate in his assertion that Black Bear was his adversary, and not some subordinate. And he even insulted Black Bear about the power disparity between them, claiming that Black Bear was not that strong. However, a referee steps in to break up the fight and start the duel because, if he doesn't, there will be a significant issue if he just lets them go at it on their own. Duel starts, he added. Kang and Singh had already taken the stage, and Singh appeared to be warming up with some stretching. Black Bear communicated with him through his head and advised him that he would take care of everything afterwards, but that he should not hold back and instead completely crush his opponent. Singh's response was that he was going to break a couple portions of his body. Then, without warning, he takes his position while he grins at Kang. He jumped out of nowhere and was about to give Kang a punch, but Kang deftly avoided his blow, and the attack was for naught. He then jumped again. As Jinnu and the Black Bear watched Kang's every move, they couldn't believe their eyes. Kang receives a rapid punch from Singh, but the latter is just as quick on his feet as Singh. Black Bear observes that Singh is playing by his opponent, and as a result, he yells at him to perform the move in the correct manner. When those who are watching the battle discover that Singh is employing an inner Kai known as the Ghost Wolf Fist, they become incensed. Because he used martial arts against regular people, people look down on him and call him names like bastard and coward. However, Singh chooses to disregard them because he is aware that even if he were to strike Kang, the plan would not be successful. Kang, on the other hand, became aware that he was close to the edge of the stage, and he questioned whether Singh had cornered him on purpose. Singh was already moving closer to Kang, and he was getting ready to punch Kang with his fist. "I will make you vomit everything you've eaten," utters Singh, who seems annoyed at Kang. On the other hand, both Jinnu and Nodi were concerned about Kang because of the precarious situation in which he found himself, with Kang standing on the edge of the platform while his opponent approached. The Black Bear witnessed everything, and it made the Black Bear very happy when Singh delivered a powerful punch to Kang's gut. When he observed how Singh was hurting for his hands, which were suddenly bleeding, his elation quickly faded and was replaced with surprise. At the same time, his mouth fell when he noticed how Singh's eyes were widening because the latter couldn't believe what happened. On the other hand, the three of them, Jin Sang, Gil, and Quack, were completely perplexed. They could not comprehend how it had taken place. He inquires of Gil whether or not he believes Xinyun cinched his abdominal area with steel plates or steel armor. But that can't be right because he didn't notice anything odd while he was on the road. However, Quack claimed that Xinyun was employing an external art. In addition, Jin Sang was perplexed since he did not understand how Xinyun could master external arts. Afterwards, Black Bear was irate and yelled at Xinyun. He also called the latter a coward due to the fact that Xinyun uses external art. However, Xinyun abruptly switched his attention to him and appeared perplexed by the exterior skills that Black Bear had stated. On the other hand, the people were shouting at the Black Bear, which caused mayhem. They defend their master when Black Bear says that he is a coward for utilizing external art, despite the fact that they are the first ones to utilize martial arts and even use inner Kai. This is why they wanted Black Bear to retract what he said about their master. And as a consequence of this, Black Bear is left with no other option but to accept their defeat in the first round. This is because if he did not do this, people would attack them given that they are in the territory of the beacon. However, Kang scoffs at their lack of understanding because he was not utilizing any form of external art to defend himself. Rather, he was using bone armor, which was producing the desired results. According to the hologram, the bone armor is a monster bone that has been fashioned into a formidable armor. It is possible to summon it and wrap it around yourself to provide additional defense against physical assaults. On the other hand, despite Xinyun's victory in the fight with Xing, the duel has not yet come to an end. After everything that Xinyun said to their young lady, it was now Black Bear's turn to come toward the stage. Black Bear was incensed by what Xinyun had said to their young lady. On the other hand, Jinwoo became furious when he observed that the Black Bear would be Xinyun's subsequent opponent in battle. He gritted his teeth and asked the Black Bear whether he had lost his mind for sparring an average person against him, who was a skilled martial artist. Black Bear argues that the circumstance has altered due to the fact that body martial arts are still considered to be a type of martial art. He didn't think there would be any other problems with battling Xinyun now that they all knew that the first master is now just a regular person who is skilled in martial arts. He didn't think there would be any other problems. On the other hand, Jinwoo and Nodi were irate at him for being so unreasonable, and they expressed their anger toward him by saying so. However, Kang interrupts them and orders them to cease what they are doing. Kang calls Black Bear a teddy bear for talking too much more than a man would do. He ordered him to get up on the stage to start the duel. Kang and Black Bear were now facing each other at a duel. Black Bear told Kang that he will regret everything while clenching his fist. But Kang was so calm, you don't see that he was scared of his opponent. For some reason, everyone that say that always loses. Utter Kang. But Black Bear became furious. For him, Kang was so arrogant after only winning with a few tricks. However, Kang observes that Black Bear seems so confident in his physical martial arts, but it's a simple task to break. Just requires a stronger power, but Kang will break it. Afterwards, Black Bear takes a position and suddenly punches Kang in the face, but Kang is able to avoid the blow and watch his every move, allowing him to prevail over the Black Bear's attack. Kang had little trouble prevailing over Xing in their battle. Even though the Black Bear was quick, Kang takes precautions to protect himself from any attack. But while Black Bear was using all of his strength on his final strike, Kang dodged it once more, and as a result, his adversary lost his footing and fell to the ground. But all of a sudden he stood up and kicked Kang, and the immense force that he unleashed on Kang caused the light to materialize due to the impact of his kick. Black Bear was under the impression that he had struck Kang. Therefore he was taken aback when he saw the latter suddenly raise his arms above his head in an effort to prevent any fatalities as a result of his assault. Even though Black Bear's attack was speedy, his opponent moved more quickly to escape his assault, and Black Bear had the unexpected notion that Kang seemed to be using a trick. He was upset because he couldn't hit Kang, despite the fact that his blow was swift. However, Kang observed that Black Bear was a bit different from his previous adversary due to the rapidity of his motion. On the other hand, many people who were observing them were uncertain as to whether or not Black Bear was truly one of the most advanced martial arts. Other people have noted that they are dissatisfied with the duel since Black Bear was unable to overcome their master, who lacks knowledge in martial arts. Other people have commented that they believe the GM family will give the seat to anyone who asks for it. In addition, the attacks and dodging that Black Bear and Kang are currently engaging in during their combat appear to have already irritated Black Bear. As a result, he hastily went toward Kang and raised his one arm in an attempt to strike. But it turned out to be a poor move for him and an opportunity for Kang, who swiftly used the yin mana, put the force on his fist, and then abruptly blew it in his face. This gave Kang the upper hand. As a consequence of this, the Black Bear was dragged outside and tumbled around on the ground. After the event, everyone was ecstatic and shouting their congratulations for their victory. However, when a Black Bear suddenly stood up and enlarged his eyes, he saw that people were cheering for their master's victory. Because of this, he approached Kang unexpectedly and applied a force to his body while gazing at Kang, who was staring at him. A light suddenly appeared on the stage just as the man was going to punch Kang. Everyone was blinded by the light, including Maiho, who instinctively covered her face in response. However, when Maiho opened her eyes, she was taken aback to discover that Xinyun's opponent was floating in the air and heading in the direction of where she was standing. She takes a quick move to the side in order to dodge the black bear. On the other hand, Jinwoo had already made his way onto the stage in an attempt to conceal Kang, and it was his sword that was responsible for the unexpected appearance of light. Everyone was taken aback, including the black bear that had not moved from its position on the ground. "What are you doing? Your master has been attacked. White Cloud faction, raise your blade." Yells of Jinwoo. To provide adequate defense for their first master, each member of the faction has already converged on him and surround him. Even Nodi gave the command for the Clean Cloud to surround their adversary. Moreover, Black Bear and their subordinates were quaking in fright because they believed that they would all perish on Beacon. Furthermore, some of them cursed their commander for being an imbecile. But Maiho was not afraid. Rather, she was outraged, and everyone was taken aback when she suddenly erupted in anger and her face transformed. Maiho's face changed as she erupted in anger. "You bugs, where do you think you're pointing your swords?" she yells. Swordsmen belonging to the Cloud faction offered their opinions on Maiho. Some of them claimed that her eyes could kill a man, but others asserted that her true hue had become apparent. Still others admitted that they feared Maiho. Maiho, on the other hand, is unable to contain her rage and lashes out at Black Bear in retaliation for sullying her honor. She appeared to be so enraged as if she wanted to kill Black Bear. On the other hand, the latter was caught off guard when his young lady suddenly slapped him. However, because they have the right to make him pay the price for attempting to kill their first master, Nodi begs Lady Maiho for permission to hand over the Black Bear to them. But he is unable to complete his sentence because something happened, and Black Bear's eyes immediately widened when he saw someone who swiftly took his life when a man suddenly arrived out of nowhere. They were all taken aback because the young lady had only to make a single hand signal, and the man would kill for her. "This should be enough, I presume," muttered the man while blood of Dalsing was on his face and body. Furthermore, when Nodi noticed that the other person was using a horrifying blood claw, he was taken aback. Even the swordsmen that were surrounding Xinyun were astounded when they heard that he was Gunamsing, also known as the horrifying blood claw, and that he was the most powerful member of the GM family. Jinwoo, on the other hand, creased his forehead in concentration. He was under the impression that his level of martial achievement was somewhere near the apex of the middle tier, but it was even too low to compete with Seeing. However, he is unable to pull back, and even if he were to perish, the only thing left for him to accomplish at this point is to safeguard the first master. Therefore, he quickly turned his attention to Xinyun and assured him that he would look out for his safety. However, Jinwoo was taken aback when Kang questioned him who was guarding whom and advised him to care more about himself because Jinwoo didn't appear to be in particularly good shape. He focused all of his attention on his first master, and as a result, he failed to notice that Seeing was looking at both of them at the same time while licking the claw that was covered in blood and appeared eager to murder once more. Gunam was hemmed in by Nodi and the other members of his staff. It appeared as though he was getting ready to launch an assault as a bluish-green energy form began to emanate from him. After that, he asks Nodi whether they want to begin a war, and if they want, he doesn't stop them. But Jin Sang cut them off and advised Nodi to back off because there appears to be confusion on both sides of the argument. Nodi's anger grew as he refused to back down and realized that it was inappropriate to dismiss Maiho and Gunam from their positions. Therefore, Jin Sang conveyed to Nodi in a level-headed manner that the viewpoint of Maiho is one that can be understood. Aside from that, there is no point in continuing the fight because the Black Bear's neck has already been severed. But Jin Sang was so anxious that his face was sweating and he clenched his teeth because everything was a mess. And if something happened to Maiho or the rest of his subordinate, they may expose the agreement that he had made with the head of the GM family. "What part of their position do you understand?" yells Nodi. However, all of the leaders and members of the faction shifted their attention to Xinyun when he ordered them to release their hold on the GM family on the grounds that what had occurred appeared to be sufficient education for them. Xinyun's decision left Nodi and Jinwoo bewildered, while the rest of the people around them were shocked that their master could remain so calm despite the fact that he was on the verge of death. Others were pleased with their master since something has really changed in him, and others were interested about when he learned to use Kai. On the other hand, Jin Sang was enraged because the one getting the lesson that Xinyun was talking about was him. And he can't forgive him, and the first master heard all his thoughts. However, Xinyun was surprised when Maiho poked hard and yelled at him. She even said that she will never forget what the first master did before turning around and leaving. But Xinyun forms a grin on his face and whispers something. Meanwhile, a discussion is taking place between two groups of men, one of whom is wearing a hat, and the other wearing a mask. The man who was wearing the hat was infuriated, and he asked the man in the mask who was in charge of the other men what was going on, since their plan had failed completely. The man who was wearing a mask is a hunchback. He suddenly apologized and stated that who would have imagined the situation would be such a mess. But at least the person who was responsible for all of this is now dead. Jin Sang was the person wearing the hat, and he was taken aback when he asked the hunchback what the plan was, and the hunchback told him that their headmaster had made a decision, and he wanted to pull out their swords if Jin Sang would allow it. Jin Sang was stunned by this information. The hunchback was informed by Jin Sang that they will begin in 7 nights, and that he will clear the dogs from the front gate. After that, everyone left the location, but they were unaware that a blue energy was creeping around on the ground. It appeared to be listening to what they were saying, and after that, it crept around and appeared to be looking for something. However, Sam continues to chatter about the fight that took place some time ago as he is present in Shin Woon's room. Shin Woon, however, did not appear to be paying attention to Sam and appeared bored. Shin Woon was informed by the latter that the leaders of the Clear Cloud and White Cloud factions are interested in learning when he will visit their respective factions. In addition to this, the vice leader of the Clean Cloud faction, No Gun Ho, requested that he also instruct them. Sam was taken aback when his master called for his attention and informed him that the events that transpired earlier during the combat weren't actually all that risky. He chastised his master and warned that Jinwoo would have to come to his rescue if things didn't turn out well for him. But Shin Woon abruptly turned around and appeared dejected. He told himself that he could have easily handled that weak strike even if Jinwoo hadn't blocked it. Afterwards, Sam abruptly sat down and informed his master that he had no idea how his heart had sunk when his master told him that he would fight a black bear. Kang, on the other hand, suddenly covered his nose with his finger, and when he realized that Sam, his brother in blood, had been thinking of stabbing a sword into his heart instead, his heart sank for Sam. He quickly apologized for the fact that Sam was worried about him. On the other hand, the latter stated that he is unable to apologize to servants such as himself. Shin Woon, however, argued against Sam by stating that he was not merely a servant due to the fact that he was a trustworthy guy. After hearing his master's remarks, Sam immediately felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. After that, he rose up because his master might be fatigued and he should relax, so he waved farewell and told him to just call him if he needed anything. Furthermore, when Shin Woon was by himself in his room, he put his hand on the window and acted as though he was trying to communicate with someone or something outside. It was the blue energy. It had come through the window and had come to rest on his table. He gives the blue energy the command to reveal what it has observed. After the blue energy moved upward and grew in size, the dialogue between Jin Sang and the hunchback materialized in the middle of the room. He reasoned with himself that it was fortunate for him to have a shadow whisper placed on him. Despite this, the Shadow Whisper has a rank that is a C+, and its mastery level is 80%. If he calls forth the Showdown Parasite, also known as the Shadow Whisper, the Abyss will always watch back. It is able to become attached to the enemy's shadow and report back to its master whatever it has heard and seen. When he learned that in a week, Jin Sang would take the guards while a bunch of assassins would come to assassinate him, he became enraged. He asked himself if he was going to kill his half-brother, but he reasoned that he should not be too reckless because he did not know the power of his adversary. As a result, he decided that he needed to make preparations for 7 days before putting his plan into action. He looks out the window at the moon, and all of a sudden he breaks into a grin, as though he was just thinking about something. "Now, shall we get to the grave?" he uttered. Kang found himself in the Valley of the Blood Mist. He raises his hand to summon a skeleton lancer, and immediately after, a skeleton materializes in front of him and kneels down. He then made a request for the status window, after which a hologram appeared and informed him that a skeleton lancer was a skillful spearman who was 20 levels high. The ability is a vagabond of the first rank, with a weakness in aiming and a moderate spirituality. It has the skills of 19 Young Chain Strike and Lightning Bow Step, and its inner Kai has been at the level of 1825 for approximately 5 years. When Kang studied what was written on the hologram, he was overjoyed to learn that it acknowledged him as a hunter with a high B level. After that, he reversed the process of calling forth the skeletal lancer. He breaks out in a startling grin when he thinks about how quickly he can collect 5 skeletons of the first rank within a single day, not to mention the effects of all accepting power, and purify from the severing technique if the Eastern Shining Sage is insane. Once more, he communicates with the status window and then appears in the hologram to announce that he has advanced to level 22 and that the level of his inner Kai has increased to 3,360. He was able to acquire the severing art of the Eastern Shining Sage, and he considered this to be an act of divine providence on his part to claim as his own all of the inner Kai that the undead possessed. He begins to wonder if it could be related to the martial frame ability known as natural frame of a sage. All of his other stats, with the exception of magic and knowledge, are above average. He was not subject to any sort of punishment despite acquiring both the close combat ability and the mage ability. At this rate, he might also be able to master other forms of martial arts in addition to the heart arts. However, it is in his best interest to concentrate on regaining his primary necromancy ability as quickly as possible. He had the intention of going to the graves of the peaked undead, which refers to the undead with the highest rank. So he set out on foot till he reached the grave, when he was taken aback to see that it was somewhat smaller than he had anticipated. He came within a short distance of the grave of Yu Lang, the White Cloud Sword Master, who was the first leader of the Beacon clan and was known for being the most skilled swordsman in the history of the clan. After that, he placed his palm on the grave and attempted to conjure the spirit of Yu Lang, who had passed away. He believed that undead of the gold rank who had reached their full potential in martial arts would exude a golden glow. But the grave of the greatest martial artist of all time, Master Il Lang, is completely colorless. He wanted to know what Yu Lang had been keeping to himself. Kang utters the phrase Death Kai extraction. When the process of extracting death came to an end on its own, a light suddenly appeared on the grave and spread throughout the area. Then a hologram appeared, which informed him that his necromancy ability rank was not high enough to carry out the process of extracting Death Kai from the undead, and became even more perplexed when the hologram indicated that the required rank was a question mark. He starts to wonder why a gold rank undead shouldn't be able to be created with a necromancy level of B. He hypothesizes that this is due to the fact that Yu Lang must have possessed strength greater than that of an accomplished martial artist. Because of this, he was interested in determining the level of success he had achieved in martial arts while he was still alive. He circled back around and was about to depart, having concluded that his attempt to conjure the spirit of Yu Lang had been unsuccessful. Yet, he was so confident that there must be another hidden piece somewhere. However, he is obligated to search to find the grave of another top-tier martial artist if at all possible. But he cannot continue his thought because he became aware of something happening behind him. He turned around to see what it was, but his mouth dropped open in shock as he noticed a light emerging from the tomb. He was surprised. It turned out to be a circle for calling forth skeletons. The hologram then emerged and informed him that the undead desired to follow him of their own free will, that he had satisfied the specific condition of being the one who stimulated the attention of the undead, that the temporary rank restriction on the necromancy talent had been removed as a reward, and that other perks had been granted to him as well. Afterwards, it was incomprehensible to him that the undead would want to follow him and that the undead would, of its own will, release the rank restriction. Then, a skeleton materialized out of thin air and took a seat on top of the grave. The hologram also claimed that his necromancy ability rank is significantly lower than the rank of the undead, that his rank is automatically recalibrated and calibrated to gold rank, and that his rank would automatically grow as his necromancy ability rank increases. However, Kang couldn't believe it when he called the status window and stated that the ability and skill of the peak swordsman is all of the peak swordsmen and 12 swords of the thunder clouds are at a plus rank and more. Moreover, he suddenly furrows his brow when he notices that the skeleton warrior is walking toward him instead of kneeling for loyalty. He was also surprised as he widened his eyes when the skeleton warrior talked to him through his mind and said that he was an interesting lad. He thought that the emotion of the peak swordsman, Yu Lang, was being sent directly to him and the means the peak swordsman had chosen him. He was confused and asked himself if he could handle the skeleton when it suddenly put its hand on his chest. Furthermore, the status window suddenly appeared and began to indicate that the peak swordsman is attempting to transfer the 12 swords of the thunder cloud and the art of the lightning thunder god. The decision of whether or not he wishes to take advantage of this ability is being posed via the status window. And the reason why the peak swordsman put its hand on his chest is because it is transferring its talent towards Kang. A smile breaks out on his face as he acknowledges its capacity. Meanwhile, the moon is the only source of light for the large number of people who are frantically racing through the woodland at high speed. The man with the hunchback who appears to be in charge gives the order for his subordinates to take a short break. They were taken aback by the suddenness of the event, and as they turned around to look behind them, they saw a woman with a mask who yelled at them and instructed them to run in the appropriate manner. Even worse, the lady kicked one of the lower-level subordinates and cursed at the others. But the hunchback Gunam interrupts and asks the lady whether she was required to follow them. As a reaction, the woman stated that she needed to personally witness his limbs being cut off and beg for his life with her own 2 eyes. The latter believed that the lady was a nasty wench and that regardless of her knowledge of the demonic art, she would have continued to live her life. After we arrived, do you think Jin sang, that rat would pretend not to know anything? Asked the lady. Gunam responded by stating that it was not an issue because he, too, was in a difficult situation as a direct result of Xinyun's achievements. After she called him a maggot and stated that he didn't realize that the black bear had cost him his neck, he suddenly let out a force because he was outraged. He could have gotten into a confrontation with the lady, but instead he instructed her to shut up and get going again so that he could avoid it. When the lady saw that Gunam was incensed because she blamed him for what had occurred to the black bear, she abruptly halted when she discovered that Gunam was already releasing a power and playing with his claw. We're moving again, uttered Gunam. On the other hand, when they were getting ready to go, everyone was taken aback when they noticed something was coming up behind them. Because one of the subordinates believed that it was an ambush, he guarded the lady and put his own body in the way of anything that might have approached. When something suddenly pierced the body of the subordinate, everyone there was completely taken aback. Gunam noticed it and his eyes widened as he realized that the object was a bone. He focused his attention to the spot from which the bone had originated. When he saw that a large number of bones were coming towards them and had already slain a couple of his people in a short amount of time, his eyes widened and he furrowed his forehead. When one bone was getting closer to the lady, he used his body as a shield for her, and he used his claw to avoid it. When he saw that his subordinates were in disarray and were astonished by the sudden appearance of the bone, and that all of them would be killed if he didn't step up, he commanded the remaining subordinates to wrap their kai around their swords and knock the bone away. He then released a force from within his body. Afterwards, the subordinate of Gunam obeys his command, and they suddenly release their kai to their sword, after which they begin evading every bone that was heading in their direction. Oh, pretty good, uttered Kang when he saw what happened. On the other hand, a significant number of Gunam's subordinates had been killed, and others had been injured. It infuriated him that he had yelled at their adversary to come out of the shadows and stop acting like a coward by hiding. So, Kang revealed his identity from behind the tree, and he responded to the assassin's accusation that he was a coward by stating that it was absurd to make such a statement while they were on their way to kill him. Gunam was perplexed as to how Xinyun could be in this location. He did not know what response to give. On the other hand, Kang asks Gunam why he didn't talk or whether it's because Gunam believes that he won't be able to recognize them even if they wear a mask. Consequently, he pointed both Gunam and the woman whose name was White Lily with his finger. Gunam tells him that it is risky to accuse them of carrying out an assassination, and that the reason they were in that location was because they were carrying out a covert task that had been given to them by the leader of the Jian family. Kang abruptly says that their hidden task was to eliminate him after suddenly forming a grin on his face. White Lily's anger was fueled by the possibility that Jin Sang had betrayed them by informing his half-brother that they intended to kill him. As a result, she ordered her subordinates to simply kill Xinyun. On the other hand, Gunam believed that both of the brothers were playing a game of bait with them. Since a large number of bone spears were released all at once, there must be more bone spears with him. When he looks at Xinyun, though, he is unable to perceive anyone other than himself. He pondered in his head if Xinyun was foolish or stupid for coming all by himself. He came to the conclusion that Xinyun had perhaps launched a device, which is excellent news given that Xinyun had made it simpler for them to eliminate him. Afterwards, Gunam suddenly opened his arms wide and let forth a burst of energy while he was questioning Xinyun about whether or not he didn't want to wait for his death. Yes, this is how this should go, uttered Xinyun. Then a large number of Gunam's subordinates made a sudden attack on Kang, but he was prepared for it and summoned another set of bone spears, which he then abruptly fired towards his adversary. His adversaries were taken aback as he once again launched a set of bone spears when it was already too late for them to evade the attack since it was too quick for them to avoid being pierced all over their body. However, everyone was taken aback when Xinyun declared that he had not started the process yet. On the other hand, Kang thought that the bone spears consume a lot of mana, so he has to control the usage, but it's not enough to scare them. However, Gunam was sweating and seemed confused and scared. He thought that it was definitely not Xinyun using his kai to move those spears, and there's no way he was a transcended peak martial artist at his age. Therefore, it must be demonic arts. His eyes widened when he realized that the demonic sect might have something to do with the revival of Xinyun. And as a result, he suddenly shouted and released a massive force all over his body and said that it was simply a trick and all they have to do is kill Xinyun. In addition, he thought that because of the trick that Xinyun might use, it caused some casualties in their part, but they are still way more for them and the numbers of spears flying at them has decreased. If they run at him all at once, they can kill him. So Ganam made the announcement that he would be taking charge of his subordinates and was about to assault when Xinyun warned him that he was not alone, which caused him to immediately stop. Kang raised his palm in a startlingly rapid motion and immediately called out his 5 skeleton warriors. When they saw Kang's skeleton soldiers, all of Ganam's subordinates were terrified, and some of them even started crying out of sheer terror. They watched as the skeletons emerged from the ground and grasped their weapons in preparation to attack. Now this is demonic arts, uttered Kang. When those 5 skeleton warriors stepped in front of them, the others quickly began praying, and Ganam began to perspire out of dread. The latter believed that he had spent his entire life as a murderer, but his body still froze in dread whenever he saw a skeleton. He also asked himself how could something coming from simple demonic rituals have that strength to summon skeleton warriors. However, the skeleton warriors begin their assault on their opponent. Because of this, Ganam warned his subordinates that whoever turned back would meet their death at his hands. Despite their fear, his subordinates make the decision to fight, leading them to believe they are only a bone, then rush towards the skeleton warrior who is now approaching them. However, Kang let out a sigh and asked himself if they were all crazy for going through heaven and hell, but they chose to die. The skeleton warrior was on his side while pointing its bow and arrow at their opponent. Skeleton warriors belonging to Kang were making their way towards Ganam's subordinate. They used swords to battle against one another in this conflict. One of the people saw an arrow flying towards him, so he slashed it with his sword. However, he did not see another arrow coming towards him, and it struck him in the forehead. As a consequence of this, the guy fell to the ground and was killed. Ganam was there for it all, and it looks like he's afraid because he's sweating. He assured himself that he had already seen those formidable foes defeated by the Dark Shadow Iron Chain Arrow, which consisted of 2 arrows traveling in the same direction. He can't help but wonder how that skeleton could possibly use the skills of Zhejiang's most accomplished archer, No Juk Moon. Ganam was unaware of the fact that Yu Il-lang, the skeleton, was the most strong member of the Beacon clan when he was still alive. In addition, he suddenly realizes that the 19 Yang chain strike of One Whole Spear Ghost and the Black Tiger Fist of Tiger Iron Fist that the skeleton uses are the skills of Zhejiang's martial artist. He furrowed his brow when he heard one of his subordinates coughing and asking for help. He ignored it and thought that he will put himself in danger if he tried to defeat Xinyun's subordinate. Then he noticed that the latter was calmly standing and didn't throw any more spears, meaning he was focused on control those skeletons, and that's a chance for him to kill Xinyun. Then he abruptly ran towards the latter. When Ganam was already quite close to Xinyun, he turned to look to the side and realized that something was approaching. A force that took the appearance of light suddenly erupted towards him. Ganam was alarmed. Because of this, he came to a sudden halt and discovered that the light was a force that had been created by one of the skeletons who was attempting to protect Xinyun. He was so enraged that he wrinkled his brow and clenched his teeth the entire time. Xinyun and all of the skeletons are making their way toward him. Ganam thanked Xinyun for making the last moment of his life enjoyable and suddenly chuckled before those skeletons took his life. On the other hand, Kang was satisfied because what occurred was way more than he expected. The Thundercloud 12 sword using lightning thunder god art, its power is unbelievable, and it seems he created a barrier using the Thunderbolt. And from that moment onwards he can train more seriously in martial arts. Then the hologram stated that a new summonable peak assassin has been added to his stash. That's why Kang was delighted as he walked to the lady with a mask who happened to be Mai-ho, who widens her eyes when he sees that Xinyun was walking towards her and can't escape because her body can't move. On the other hand, Mai-ho had been restrained by Kang's shadow bind, which is why she was unable to move. Kang removed the mask to expose Mai-ho's true identity. The latter immediately confesses that she was duped by Jin Sang, and then she cries fake tears as she claims that they are lovers and that they are engaged. Because of this, she insists that she would never harm Xinyun, and she begs him to begin over because it is not yet too late. On the other hand, Kang gave Mai-ho the order to quit acting because she was so excellent at it, and he questioned whether or not she still kidnapped travelers and tortured them. When Maiho found out that Xinyun knew such things, she became perplexed and furrowed her brow. As a result, she made the decision to kill Xinyun since she knew that if her secrets were out, her life would be over. She turned on a device that was attached to her fist, and then she suddenly sprayed it on Xinyun while urging him to die right then. She couldn't help but giggle when she saw the bluish smoke strewn around Xinyun, but she was surprised when she realized that she had been mistaken about having defeated Xinyun because the latter told him that his poison resistance skill is already at rank B+. Afterwards, Maiho's eyes widened as she saw the blue smoke dissipate over time, revealing Xinyun's face. Xinyun had already been pointing his 2 fingers in her direction when he suddenly thrust those fingers into Maiho's chest, which caused Maiho's eyes to widen. Kang, on the other hand, revealed to Maiho that he had slashed her throat in order to prevent her from speaking. Kang also shared with her that one of the things he appreciates most about their world is that he does not have to be concerned with breaking the law when he murders people like her. Maiho was shivering with terror as Kang stimulated the corruption. After that, she went to her knees and tried her best to utter words, but she was unable to do so. Now, however, she was quivering with fear because of Xinyun and then collapsed to the ground. Kang had only ever used this ability once before, and that was to dispose of the body of a gigantic creature. He was unaware that it could potentially be useful in this situation. He got down on one knee in front of Maiho, who was trembling so badly that her entire body was quivering. Her eyes widened and her jaw fell. After that, he reached under his garments and pulled out what appeared to be a golden object, which he then tossed at the dead body of Maiho before fleeing the scene. "You're next, you Jinsang," uttered Kang. Couple of days later, Jinsang was furious and ordered Quack along with his subordinate to explain what happened, but he became enraged when none of them spoke. The subordinate thought that the assassin group sent from GM family never came back, and later, a woman's corpse was found to have decomposed over 10 years. However, Quack thought that upon the discovery of an identity card on the corpse, they believed it was GM Maiho's body. The GM's family leader hasn't regained consciousness since the trauma. On the other hand, Jinsang furrowed his brow while bullets of sweat formed on his face. He told himself that they found an identity card on the corpse and the killer must have planned it. He clenched his teeth when he realized that it might be Xinyun's warning for him, so he abruptly stood in his chair and instructed Quack and his subordinate to do something about the situation, because if that continues, Jinsang can't continue his sentence because Quack interrupted him and said to calm down and no need to worry. Then his eyes suddenly changed and even his whole face. Then he was instructed by Quack to go to the red light district and drink some alcohol there. On the other hand, after what Quack said, Jinsang suddenly calmed down as if Quack hypnotized and he was under some magic. Afterwards, Jinsang left the two when his faces seemed blank and the only thing in his mind was Quack's order. A subordinate of Quack suddenly lets out a sigh and exclaims that he cannot believe that everything could become so complicated due to Xinyun's actions alone. But the subordinate was perplexed when Quack told him that a knotted up string may be easily taken off. So Quack explained to him that if a bug became an impediment to the grand plan of their sect, then they had no choice but to exterminate it, even if it meant torching the entire house. The subordinate then grinned from ear to ear and thought to himself that the Beacon clan would soon be covered in blood as soon as it was possible. In addition, Quack issued an order to his subordinate, telling him to get ready for a holy battle with the White Blood Asuras underground. He said this because the White Blood Asuras underground will start the executions as soon as the day has begun. He also instructed his subordinate to enhance the intensity of the curse placed on Xinyun and make it as severe as possible because he didn't notice that it didn't harm him. And it appears that Xinyun has developed a resistance to the curse. "Yes, sir," uttered the subordinate. On the other hand, when Sam informed the people that it was impossible for them to meet his lord, it caused commotion among the people. People, however, continued to assert that even for a few moments they desired to communicate with Xinyun or pass him a letter for the purpose of Sam being able to deliver it to Xinyun. They were all begging Sam to save them and appeared to be in fear. But Sam told them that his young master instructed him that he will not meet anyone for the time being. "Please head back," uttered Sam. On the other hand, when people began to leave, some of them abruptly cursed and wondered whether they were required to appease Sam, while others expressed sorrow over the fact that they had only supported Xinyun, which would have resulted in him taking Sam's place. Sam smiled at the folks around him despite the fact that he had just heard all of that and was convinced that he was about to lose his mind if people didn't stop. On the other hand, Kang disclosed to Sam that he was going to be absent from the residence for a couple of days and gave Sam strict instructions to prevent anyone from entering his room and to pretend that he was still present. Kang abruptly said farewell to Sam, who was crying at the time. He didn't want any arguments or explanations since he didn't want them. After that, he wandered around a large mountain, and eventually he came to a cave where a sinister heir was moving toward him.